Welcome back to Design Discord with Fernando
Yeah.
and Alyssa.
It's great to be back.
It's great to be back, actually. I've already missed it, and we recorded like last week for our first time.
Yeah.
And I've been like, woohoo, so excited about doing episode number 2. Let's talk about design fairs, because it's like, this whole industry kind of revolves around them. And we want to talk a little bit about why we think Mexico might be kicking our ass in the game of design right now. What are your thoughts around even just that idea, like that Mexico is kicking our butts?
I think there's 2 ways to look at it. I think there's one which is from an actual market size and growth perspective. And I think for me, something that I think about often, because through area, I see so many different makers. And I do think that fundamentally, a lot of Mexican designers have developed a visual language that feels really distinct and unique or maybe it's also not only distinct and unique, but Mexico is sort of the gateway to Latin America, to the US. And so it feels like, oh, maybe this is our first step into getting to know, Central American, South American design is like the first step is sort of going through Mexico. And I mean, even though it's so close, the culture there is completely different, and I think you see that through the work that's being made. And I think a lot of people are fascinated by that visual language, which then, the visual language plus, what I think you have a little bit more perspective on, which is the cost of producing in Mexico, of showing in Mexico, has, I think, resulted in a market that feels really exciting.
Do you have any examples of some of the designers that you're like, oh, that's a really good designer from Mexico?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the people you track, like who are some of those people that you're thinking of?
Yeah, the first person that comes to mind is a woman named Joy Valdez, who has a studio called Joyful Objects, Yes, which is a crazy studio name.
Yeah.
But she uses a lot of like basket weaving techniques to do both furniture pieces and frames for mirrors. She recently released a cast resin piece, but to me, it feels like she's really utilizing, aspects of the traditional crafts, Mexican crafts, in a more contemporary way. Yeah, she's definitely the first person that comes to mind for me. And also, I mean, we are both familiar with Design VA, who work between Guadalajara and New York City, but all their
They're making
pieces
some
are produced,
really cool stuff. We'll hopefully link them in this. They got cool stuff going on. Yeah. Well, when I think of Mexico right now, I think of Masa Gallery. Masa, which is, I don't know if you've heard of Masa, but if you haven't, you need to check out Masa. They're pretty much doing, and I'm just saying this to Alyssa, but to everyone listening, like Masa is pretty much, in my opinion, doing the most innovative stuff. It's a collaborative between Héctor Esrawe, who is a fucking amazing designer. I would say he's probably top designer in Mexico, all around. He's got a tremendous studio. They're producing at the highest level. He's got different branches he's got like collectible work. He has a furniture line. He works with his, I think maybe wife or girlfriend partner. And Brian Thoreen, who, if you don't know Brian Thoreen, the guy is an amazing designer.
Oh, you know who else?
Who else?
Amazing. There's another Fernando.
Yeah, there's another
Laposse.
Laposse.
He's
incredible.
That guy's sick. I've had a crush on him ever since freshman year of university.
Like an art crush, like a design crush?
Yeah, like a design crush.
Yeah,
I used to watch his videos of him like beating the cactus.
Dude, he's really come up, dude. He's really like planted himself. He also is working with Friedman Benda, so that's obviously bolstered his career quite a bit. But no, total props to that guy. He's doing great work. I hate that we share the same name, but he is a badass, and I love the stuff that he's doing. I was thinking of him immediately as well.
Yeah.
So, but let's break this out. Brian Thoreen, who is a friend of mine, we came up together in 2000. 16 when I did collective design. He did kind of this like little annex show inside of there. And he presented these beautiful works at that time, these brass pieces, really great stuff. He was an LA based guy. And he moved to Mexico, just kind of felt random at the time. This was like more than a decade ago. And I was like, dude, why are you going to Mexico? And, it was, well, I think he was intrigued by the culture there, by the, he's got this beautiful studio with this like tree growing out of the middle of it. It's something spectacular. But, artists have done this their entire lives. Like we migrate to places where we can afford to make work. Berlin, which you know well.
Mm-hmm.
Berlin was a hotspot in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, right? Why? Because people can afford to make shit there. And you can live at a low cost. And so Mexico City has that advantage over New York, for sure, LA, for sure. So I think you're seeing a natural migration to places where, Mark Grattan, who was on the Ellen Show, who won the Ellen Show, he's based half his time in Mexico City. I don't know if that's still true, but he was. And he gets his stuff fabricated there. So, we're seeing a migration. Now, I just want to be clear, like none of those people, well, I can't say none because I don't have the data to support it, but mostly they do not sell in Mexico. Everyone is making things and trying to sell in the United States. That's true for Europe. That's true for Mexico. So that is something to kind of think about. It's like, well, they're able to kind of get this arbitrage from working there, but they're really still focused on the American market. So those are some of that's what I kind of see that's going on. Have you been to Mako or Material or any of those yet?
No. I haven't, yeah, no.
You haven't been to Mexico
City?
I
actually have,
Nice, okay.
No,
well, we'll have to go.
Maybe it's this year. I have a question, actually a more personal question for you. So you grew up in Mexico. Growing up in Mexico, did you have any like perspective or exposure to the world of design, architecture, creativity? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look, so I'm not Mexican. A lot of people think I'm Mexican, but I'm not. My parents are Uruguayan. My father had a job there in the early 90s to the late 90s. And so I went to high school and some part of middle school there. And so I was an artist then. When I was 14, I was an artist by then. I was like drawing and stuff. And I was super impacted by being in Mexico. I mean, I would say my first major experience was mostly with the museum in Monterrey. I went to school in Monterrey. We lived in Monterrey. It's a huge town, 5 million people, super bougie. And there's this museum called Mako. Sorry, not Mako, Marco, which means frame in Spanish. It is such a beautiful museum. To this day, it remains my favorite museum in the world. And I grew up going there by myself. I would go on the weekends, and there was some super impactful shows there. Like I remember Kenny Scharf retrospective that I walked through. This might have been in the mid 1990s. And a Arturo Rivera, this really famous Mexican painter show, because I was super into like figuration at the time. And the space, this museum was designed by Legorreta, which is a descendant of Barragán. Barragán, everyone knows, very famous Mexican designer. Well, this is kind of one of his ascendants. And the Legorreta building is just, it felt like a cathedral to me, and I would just go, and it has this insane fountain that shoots out water a couple times a day. But they had such really, really cool solo shows that came from the United States there. So that was my first exposure. really to architecture, less design. I honestly didn't know anything about design in those days. So, what about you? When you were in Berlin, what was your exposure to design there? Or none?
Fun question.
You're like,
Well, I guess my exposure to design mostly comes from RISD. I wouldn't say, oh gosh, I think Berlin is a facade. Like, you know, it is so oversaturated with artists. I would say mostly fine. Let's just say it's so oversaturated with creatives. If we say particularly fine artists, but the general population in Berlin and in Germany cannot afford to collect art. And so you have, I think there's some statistic, there's like 50,000 artists in Berlin. And I think there's probably 500 collectors, And so, when
but also they're
it's
not probably like high level collectors. They can't be. I mean, because
they're buying, I feel like they're buying mostly pieces below or around 10,000.
Right.
And for 10,000 in a New York City gallery is could be an emerging artist.
It is.
And
10 to 12 is like starting point for an emerging artist. Yeah.
And so I just don't think the buyer's market really exists there. I would say maybe from design, now that I think about it, not so much collectible design in sort of what we're exposed to, but I would say generally Northern Europe is much more sensitive to quality of spaces, quality of objects. And so there's just, even just the general furniture companies that exist there, I think produce much higher quality pieces than, let's say, I don't know, in the US, what an average furniture company is, like a Raymore & Flanigan, whatever it might be.
I would say Restoration Hardware is maybe the
totally, but I mean,
American.
I think even that very base equivalent of furniture companies in Northern Europe produces to a much higher standard of quality and design. It's much more minimal, reduced. It's, there isn't the same we want our walnut bed frame with rosettes. They don't gravitate towards that. So there's a general I don't know what you call it, a sensitivity to design, but I would say not the kind of design that we're necessarily talking about here.
Yeah, that and that's interesting. I think about that. I'm like, so then who are the Europeans making design for, right? In a lot of ways, there's a huge foundation of design there. Obviously, Paris goes back. Design goes way back in Paris. These cultures that are, are not so. They're just older culture, so they have a deep, more entrenched, view of design. You got the whole thing in Eindhoven, which is, kind of sparked a lot of famous designers from there. But I'm curious because design fairs keep opening and proliferating all around, right? You got Brussels, you got Paris, now they're opening everywhere. You got the one in, what's that one in that little town?
Basel?
No, not Basel, but it's the one where it's like this, I'll remember as we're talking. But it's like
Rotterdam?
No, it's not Rotterdam. It's called Nomad. Sorry, Nomad.
Oh,
that one?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't remember the town it's in, but it's like.
Does that one not go to different places?
I think it does, but but maybe because it's called Nomad. Yeah, but you have also obviously Salone del Mobile, which is huge in Milan, but I know for a fact that a lot of my designer friends in Europe are looking for American markets, right? And so because people just can't afford design at the level that it's, that it costs in Europe, or it seems like that's not where their priorities go. And I see the same thing in Mexico, or at least I feel that way, because look, I did participate in Mako. We went in, well, it was the first year that they did design, because so Mako has their fine art section, and then they have their design section. I believe we were there the first year. Wasn't that big. There might have been like 20 of us or something like that. I sold a big old fucking goose egg. Zero. And my entire career, I can tell you with 1,000% certainty, I have never sold a piece in Mexico. I even went to the extent of like, I was like, holy shit, like I'm here. We brought all this stuff. I shipped it all. Mako's like 3 or 4 days or whatever it was. Zero sales. So I was a little discouraged. So I was like, why don't we rent a showroom for 6 months, which was very inexpensive, and let's leave the work here. And I found this really great Montserrat, who I love. She's worked with different galleries. She has her own thing going on. I asked her if she would kind of like man it for me, or basically bring clients. We left it up for 6 months, might have been maybe longer. And no, it was 6 months. And again, nothing sells, And I'm not trying to say like, well, my work should sell everywhere, but, we have a good track record. So I kind of know, places I take my work tend to some buyers. But so it made me realize that Mexico is just not there yet, or, felt like it wasn't there. The market wasn't there. And maybe it has to do with like this idea that you kind of need to be known in those regions to sell. I had the same thing said to me when I went to Dubai. I did a fair in Dubai, which ended up being very successful for us in the long term, but didn't sell a thing there.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but
do you think it's because, like, for example, I've seen you now on the floor at a fair in New York, and because you've been based in New York for so many years, you have such a robust network. You can do a loop around and easily find someone that you know. But when you go to Dubai, you go to Mexico City, you go to Paris, you don't have that same foundation of a network. And so maybe for when you're doing a fair in your own home city or home country, it's almost a moment to like nurture your network rather than like build it up from scratch.
Yeah, there's, I'm sure if we had a Mexican designer in this talking to us about this, like they'd be like, dude, Fern, we sell all the time to Mexico. And, like Pari Hector has a robust business there, and Brian probably sells a lot of work there. But yeah, it might have to do with that, Yeah, I guess I have heard from every fair that I've done, like we just did Aspen last year. And, not a lot of people in Aspen know my work, not the like locals. So they were like, you need to come back a few years. I was like talking to Todd Merrill guys, and they had done it for a second year, and, and you build up a little bit of rapport over time. Yeah, that may be the trick. But like, again, like, you're spending $30,000, $40,000 on a fair.
Yeah.
You don't make any money. It's like tough to.
Yeah, it's interesting to go from the US, where that, has by far the strongest buyer market, elsewhere to look for a new buyer market. I feel like maybe that's not really the right call.
Yeah, but then
I also wonder, and this is a question that I think about a lot as we build area and think about, these key features, one of which I think is really being able to search in a localized way. And I can imagine that if you are a Mexican collector, there's a furniture designer I've talked to and know decently well named Jiri, who's based in the Czech Republic. He makes amazing work. He sells mostly to Czech collectors. And I wonder if you're a collector not in the United States, you feel not necessarily a responsibility, but maybe like a curiosity to support the local creative and design community?
I mean, of course, like I think that that's sure. Like New York buyers, they want to take a train to go see their design. Yeah, I think there's definitely
Yeah.
something to do with that. But then really, how, unless you're like a well-financed gallery like Carpenters, Friedman, Future Perfect, like how do you really start to build out new marketplaces for yourself,
Mm,
in general? And then
it's
also,
true.
if those efforts don't really yield that many results, like for example, during the fucking China boom, there was literally a China boom. Um,
Mm,
Pre-COVID, during COVID, China was obviously, the millionaires were being minted every single day. Design was being taken more and more serious every day there. And dude, 1 year alone, from zero to $400,000 more in sales in China in 1 year.
mm,
It changed this. I was like, what the fuck? Like, and by the way, I didn't sell any of it. It was through a gallery, through Chris Sau, who owned Objective for a while. You might know his gallery. That guy was fucking crushing it in China.
mm,
And part of it was that people in China trusted Chris. Okay. And they know him. And so they were able. And so my strategy over time was like, let me link up with people more localized. Okay. In Italy, I had Rosanna Orlandi showing my work. I mean, she still technically does, but I think Rosanna's at a different phase in her life where she's not too worried about sales. And so, yeah, it's just true. Like, she's like a brand unto herself. So that was my strategy. Let me go with like kind of more localized people who can then build my presence
mm.
there. You know, because it was tough to invest in those areas, and
Yeah.
also there's a language barrier. Like I can't go to China and sell my work. It's like impossible. And by the way, the China boom is over. It was, the faucet went from flooding water to nothing.
Mm.
It was crazy. Crazy. Um, so that was like, well, that's over with. And so, like I'm pretty steadfast on the United States. Um, you know,
So I think I mean, it's a pretty interesting approach though that I feel like you're mentioning that I feel like you and I haven't even really talked about it yet, is like finding this sort of sales rep in a new market that you want to be in. How would you uh how would you say, like, okay, for example, if we have a emerging designer not in the US, and we're talking about this sort of approach of finding, some sort of representation within the US. How would you recommend for someone to go about that process?
that's a good question. Look, I would say this is really tough because the truth of it is that you need another artist or designer from that's showing at a certain gallery or network to make the introduction.
Mm,
Unsolicited requests don't really work that well. Like you can't just like send your portfolio, be like, hey, can you like represent me in
mhm.
Paris? That it just doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, you kind of do need someone to recommend you, and it's literally like if you get the recommendation, you're almost like guaranteed a spot in there. If your work is good enough, or they're willing to kind of take a risk on you. Um, so really, the back channel is to, you got to get yourself out there and show as much as you can in smaller shows like the Lyle show that you're doing, right? If someone
Mm,
comes in, okay, even if you're showing a small piece, like if it intrigues someone, they'll look at your work, and that's the way you do it. You try to get into group
yeah.
shows, you build your network. If you're just like alone in the ether making,
Mhm.
it's gonna be tough to get yourself into the network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so special for me to have the opportunity to do a show in New York because a lot of the international designers that we invited to make a piece, for many of them, it's their first time showing in the US
Oh, nice. Yeah.
or maybe showing in New York. And it feels, I think, to many of them like a really big step or opportunity, regardless if it's, a show with many, many participants, but it's like, oh, you've hit that milestone
I
in some
mean,
way. So
anytime you can see on a resume the New York, New York line,
yeah.
I remember how important that felt to me
Mm.
when it first happened. And I was like, oh my God, it was like Miami, Florida, and then New York, New York. Those are the things you want to see on a
Mm.
resume. Yeah, it is. It's important. The thing is, if you think about the way that the structure works, right? It's like you have galleries and they're out there looking for designers. Designers are recommending people to them. And then there's showrooms that are like, maybe
Mhm.
they just show one thing you do, and they don't represent you per se, but rather they sell a side table that you make or something like that. So, breaking into those networks is not that easy. Um,
Mhm.
and so shows like the Lyle show that you guys are doing, like these are the minor opportunities that people get to like sneak in, and I
Mm.
wish there was more group shows in New York. Um, like it's just not thought of that way. It's not,
Mm.
or maybe it is, and they do host them. I'm not saying that they don't. But like, we were looking at some fairs, Jonald Dudd, which I love personally. I think they do an
Mhm.
amazing job. They're going to be showing at Shelter, which is this new fair, which I sent you the
Yeah.
the stuff about.
Yeah.
I think this is interesting. This is
Mhm.
cool. Okay, so new fairs are popping up, and one of the things I really liked about it was that there was no discrimination about being an independent or being a gallery or anything. It's just like, if you make cool shit and you can afford the booth, we're going to show your work.
Do you know what the price of the booth is? Of a booth?
Well, I think it's reasonable because Jonald Dudd posted that it was like $375 per person. So let's
Mm.
imagine that it's like 10 designers or less, so I imagine maybe the booths are probably like 3 to 5,000.
Mm.
We should find out, what it cost, and publish
I mean,
that.
that could be an interesting thing for area to do as well, is to have a booth at these fairs. I mean, almost like how Collectible
Yeah.
has a booth at Matter in Shape, that
Yes.
one in Paris happening
Yep.
like tomorrow, and then they have a roster of emerging designers, maybe like 15 or so, 10 to 15 folks. So it's a totally different. You've
Yeah.
never seen a fair exhibit at a fair, you know?
Right. It's
Yeah.
because the fairs are becoming kind of brands, themselves, and so they're like, well, let's promote our brand by
Mhm.
showing through these other venues, which I think is smart.
Yeah.
Um, And I definitely think that areas should be doing that, especially if the
Mm.
participation fees are low. Like we should talk about that because that'd be a nice way
Yeah.
to, you got a lot of visibility at
A
Collectible,
lot. Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah, I would definitely say that'd be a good route. So for me, like it's tricky for me to do smaller fairs. Okay, because I'm so established at this point that if I'm not at Design Miami or one of the big ones, kind of feels a little out of place.
Mm.
I felt a little bit out of place at Collectible this year. Um, I didn't see the top designers that I normally see come through the fair, which I was a little bit surprised by.
Mm.
Um, you know, so, and I certainly won't do a fair outside of the US at this stage. Um,
Mm.
because it's too expensive and I just don't make sales.
Yeah. So you're talking, when you say top designers, you mean, folks like Chen and Kai.
No, I
Or
mean like the
no?
buyers. I'm talking about
Oh, you're talking buyers,
yeah, I'm
buyers. Because
talking
I
like
know we
the
also at the same time had the conversation. I think when you said, "Oh, you felt out of place," for me, I almost thought you meant sort of like from the
well,
uh, presenter's
fortunately,
side, or
like,
yeah.
there were some big designers there.
Mhm.
Right across from me or behind me was Brian
St.
Thoreen, thank
Vincent's.
goodness. He
Yeah.
was good. Um, who did you say?
St. Vincent's. He was at St. Vincent's.
At St. Vincent's, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but Emma Scully was there with her gallery.
Mhm.
She's top. I mean, I thought Lyle had a nice presentation there. Um, it
But
was
you were meaning more from the interior designer side.
yeah, like
Oh,
I know the
interesting.
serious buyers. You know what I mean? And maybe look, I wasn't there every single day of every single hour,
Yeah.
but those
Kelly
people show up.
Wearstler came all the way
Did
from
she?
LA. Yeah.
Yeah, she's
But
just
that was maybe that's the one that people like really know by face, let's say.
well, was she there the VIP night?
No. No, no.
Okay,
She was there the next day actually.
gotcha.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, she was there to try to figure out who she can rip off a little bit. She was like, "Oh, let me take some notes on what's cool, so I can go and have my team fabricate them at
Well,
cheaper price and sell to my clientele."
you know what I thought was actually interesting was there was a photographer. Like, I mean, that first day, that first morning after the opening was pretty quiet, and there were a bunch of photographers taking photos of the booths for people. And there was a woman who I saw who was just going around taking photos of a lot of different pieces. And she came to my booth and she took a picture of that expanded metal bench. And I asked
Yes.
her, I was like, "Oh, who are you taking photos for?" And she said, "For Kelly Wearstler." And then she just walked away. And I was like,
There you go.
"This is so weird. Like, how is she going to remember who this is?" But maybe that's not the goal.
It's not the goal.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, if we see Kelly produce a series of expanded metal pieces, we'll know where the inspiration came from.
Yeah.
Although, by the way, I have to say, the expanded metal thing, it's been a little
Hard.
bit territory that's been
Yeah, yeah,
pretty
yeah.
explored, by the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit like that expanded metal stuff is a little,
Yeah.
you know.
I do have to say, I think Michelle, the designer, she does a good job. I think her visual language is a little bit different from other things that
Yeah, it's a
exist.
little quirkier, a little bit
Yeah.
more out there, non-functional,
Yeah.
completely sculptural. Yeah, but it's still language that's been
For sure.
covered.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, look, I do want to just say, like, there's something going on in the sense that the fairs are proliferating all over the world. Okay, design everywhere, blah blah blah. Okay, and there's a little sense to there's a sense to me that it's like only really benefiting the fairs
Mm.
in a way because see, this is the part of there's no transparency in the design world. Okay, there's no numbers, just like the art world. It's very opaque. So we don't know if anyone actually makes any money at these things. And of course, there's going to be
Mm.
winners and losers everywhere. Okay. But like, how can there be this constant proliferation of design fairs and design events, but no one's actually really making money? And if they are, maybe it's just the top dogs. Because like, I mean, I'll be frank, I didn't sell a piece at Collectible. I presented a new collection of lighting. We have then since gotten inquiries, but a lot of it comes from my Instagram posts. It didn't come from being at the fair. So, like I invested a shit ton of money into doing that and not a single sale from the fair. Like, I'm just speaking
Yeah.
from my experience, but look, I have almost never sold directly at the fair.
Mm-hmm. That's what I think you told me that going into it. And a few of the designers that I showed told me the same thing, that sales on the floor at design fairs are quite rare.
Very rare. So
Versus
then,
the other day, I went to Freeze in LA and like, I just, whatever, I love to ask. I'd be like, how much is that piece? And they're like,
Oh, that's sold. Bullshit. It's such bullshit. They just say that because they see you and they know you can't afford it, and so they're like...
There's one girl who chased me down to get my email, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, I love it. Dude, so...
You know what? I love asking that, actually, because I realized being an exhibitor at the fair, there's actually a really small percentage of people that do ask for the price of things. And even know that that's like the question that you're supposed to ask, or even know that the work is... I remember when I was, I don't know, late high school, early RISD, I would go to art fairs. I wouldn't even know that the things were for sale. I thought it was just for show.
It was like just motherfucking showing.
I was like, oh, this is great. Like, we get to see all this art.
Nah, dude,
and it wasn't until whatever, I grew up in, I'm sure, that was just a child's perspective, but
I mean,
I do think that in LA there's a lot of people that go there for show. Like, I mean, the visitors are like, oh, this is the thing that I did this weekend, and are not in the market for an art piece.
1,000%. And that's why, so I know a lot of people just check it off of their P&L as a marketing expense, okay? And that's really what it is, okay? But let's just say, for example, I always criticize Design Miami because they never let me fucking do the fair. They want me to do curio, which you can only do once or twice, maybe 3 times, like Harry, okay, like there are certain people that do it. And I know Matthieu Lehanneur has done it. I don't care to do curio. I care to be considered a main player, gallery. I can pay the booth fees every year, but they still won't let me in. I argue with them about this all the time. Last year, even at Collectible, I was talking to Grella about it. I was like, yo, you got to let me do this fair. And also, part of my logic was, you guys are going to run out of fucking exhibitors. Because at some point, you're opening LA, Miami, there's rumors about Aspen, Paris. Who the fuck is gonna pay all these fees? Who the fuck is gonna continue to do these fairs? And if you don't let new people in, because the fucking cartel, which is what it is, a fucking cartel of galleries, don't let new people in, new players, and follow the market. The market is not just galleries anymore. It is independents. And those people should be allowed in to then show the breadth of what the fucking design world actually is, and not just this like...
They don't want you.
I know!
They
someday...
don't want you to, because once it's 1, then it becomes 2, and then it becomes 3, and then it grows, and they don't want that. They know what's going to happen if they make an exception,
Oh, no. You know what's going to happen is that all the little fucking asshole gallerists are going to be like, that is completely against our business model. That doesn't, and they're going to complain. And that's what they've done in the past. And that's why. But it fucks me up because it relegates me to smaller fairs who do allow independence in, such as Collectible. But the respect is not there. You know what I mean? The respect is not fully there yet.
So why do you do the fairs at all?
Well, because you have to fucking show face. It's not enough to just do Instagram.
But what if you did your own pop-ups? If you're like, oh, I'm going to have a space in New York for a month or for a week,
Okay.
And
let's put that together. You want to know how that goes? All right. So rent the space. That's $10,000 to $15,000, maybe more, 20,000. Let's say 20,000 just for the space. Then I got to create a collection. The collection will cost me $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. All right. So I'm already in near $100,000. Then I got to hire a PR team, my former PR team, Dada Goldberg, who I love, who at minimum is going to charge me $25,000 just to help me do that. Okay, so we're already at $125,000. Then I got to host a private dinner, which costs $40,000. I've already done all these numbers. Okay, so I'm already at $165,000 to put on a private event.
You can do a cheaper dinner.
You're right, but at my level, you gotta make, it's gotta be fucking fancy, and you gotta get the right fucking chef, and you gotta have the fucking table. And by the way,
but it's actually, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, for a fair, you're still paying that $10,000 to $20,000, right?
correct.
You still have the collection. So really the only added fee that I see that you have is that press, is the
dinner, the
self-press.
space, the prep, right?
Yeah.
No, and the legit. Yes, you're right. But what happens is, at least at a fair, you're consolidating the viewership. Like, you know who's going to come, right? I know that if I show at Design Miami, all the top designers are going to be there. Okay, from the West Coast to East Coast, Ken Falk to the Tony Young, everyone's going to fucking be there. Okay, so I don't have to worry, right? With the PR team, although I know I can get a really good crowd if I did a private event. I've thought about it. You know, like, I'm not against it.
It's a lot of work, but
It's a lot of fucking work. It's a lot of work.
maybe you should try, because then you have the
I'll tell you what my real plan is.
Because what if you did your own show and you sell everything and you're like, oh wow, the
Doesn't
return
work
on
that
this
way.
was way high.
No one's gonna walk in and they're gonna think just like you did as a RISD kid. They're gonna
For
come in
sure.
and be like, "Wow, look at this free thing to see. This
Yeah.
free event of cool, weird objects that cost way too much."
Mm-hmm.
So I've thought, yes, that is an alternative. What I'd rather see, and I'm invested in a cryptocurrency that if I fucking make it, if this fucking thing takes off, okay, which we'll find out tomorrow. By the way,
Tomorrow.
yeah, tomorrow, because they're having the White House meeting about it tomorrow. They're going to announce how it's going to be structured. And I won't be a fucking bajillionaire by tomorrow, but it'll be a good... Anyway, point is, if something like that gives me some sort of outsized gains, I will fucking start my own fair. That's what I've always wanted to do. If anyone's listening, any big investor feels like they want to get in bed with me over making a real fair, I'll fucking do it. I'm there. I'll do the whole thing, dude. Just leave it to me. You put the money in, I'll do the rest.
In New York?
In New York. Hell yes. Hell yes. Because I know how to do it. You know what it's about? It's about not making money. You gotta take your fucking mind off of making money as a fair. And that's the unfortunate part of having to run a fair, is that you need to make margin.
Mm.
And that kind of destroys the ecosystem of it. Because
so then how do you, but then that kind of doesn't make any sense.
no, you
So
can
then
do
what
it as do it as a nonprofit. And I don't mean set up a nonprofit entity.
Your goal is to break even.
Your goal is to break even.
Mm-hmm.
That way you can keep the cost down for the people who are in the fair. You don't have to continually raise prices all the time, charge you $150 for one additional light. Okay? It's like outrageous shit. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you drill a hole in the wall, they're going to charge you $100 what they're doing at the fairs. They're trying their hardest to just like, how can we make as much money as we can? Oh, you need a light? Oh yeah, that's going to be $1,000. You're like, what the fuck, $1,000? And then you can't even install it because you need to be a union member to put it. It's like the model is broken because it needs to make money. And that's why it aggregates to the top players only. Sure, carpenters can pay any fucking fee anywhere across the globe, blah, blah, blah. But what about everyone else? So, we've talked about this. Like, if Area can eventually occupy some of this space too, we'd love to get involved, I think.
Yeah. Man, it's a lot of crazy logistics.
It
Even
is.
getting 30 pieces to New York that are, each come in an under 16 by 16 by 16 inch box is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually, someone said something to me yesterday that I thought was amazing, where one of the biggest issues I will have as a digital platform is dealing with logistics. And in the situation that I'm in now, I am dealing with logistics of pieces coming from 16 different countries. And so
Yeah.
in some ways, I am putting myself in the position to understand, okay, this is the kind of shipping broker that exists here. FedEx works here and not here. UPS is $1,000 from the Czech Republic, but $150 from Switzerland, which kind of doesn't make any sense to me. And so it's
Same
just
plane.
like,
It's like, yeah.
yeah. And yeah, or we actually have a really funny situation right now. We have an amazing piece coming from Finland from a designer named Didi Wing. It's made from wood. And yesterday we got a email from the US Customs Office that it's been confiscated because of illegal plant matter importation.
Oh my God. What
Can you
what
believe
what
that?
what do you mean? It's just the wood is a type of species
No,
or
it's
something?
it's because apparently if you have anything that's made from a plant matter, you have to submit a separate document that has the genus and the species of the material plus the weight and all of these other, and so they sent us a separate document that we had to fill out when it's like I'm like there's no
Right.
contaminants in this
Right.
piece. So
That's
but
crazy.
it's
No, I
it's
know.
interesting to learn about those things, getting an email that's like you're in violation of illegal wildlife importation.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Dude, no, we recently shipped these samples to Saudi Arabia, and they came back because they were sand, and it was like, what the hell is this? Like what, like material samples made of sand. They were rejected it. They came back. I had to
Oh wow.
resend them via FedEx. Yeah, but look, that's if we did a fair, honestly, I would
Mhm.
focus on American designers. I would focus on, it would be an American design show with American designers, um, American studios, just because it's a bit easier to manage. And by the
Yeah.
way, I know exactly who I would hire to be the director or the deputy director or whatever you want to call it, who has incredible experience doing these things. There are people out there that I could put a team together that would be fabulous.
Mm.
So I promise.
So for anyone listening, this is Fernando's pitch to you.
That is correct. That is correct. If I make it big on this crypto, I promise you guys, I'm going to have a fucking killer design fair in New York.
2026 Mastrangelo Fair coming
Nah, I
soon.
would call it something else. I would call, what would I call it? I would want it to be no galleries allowed. So I would want to call it the indie or something, independent, just something. I don't know. I'd come up with ideas. I would chat GPT it and come up with some good ideas. But because the art world has one called the Independent, so that can't do that one. But no, we would figure out something cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I did that show in Good Company. I might carry that. In Good Company already has a nice brand around it, has a good sound to it. And so I might carry it on in Good Company as a design. So it's a fair.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, if anyone's listening that wants to give me $1 million to put on a fair, I promise you I'll do a good job. And it would be so cool because we could do all right, I would have a section for established independents. Okay. My friends like Pele, if you know the lighting company, Pele's fucking amazing. They're fucking palm pieces. Okay. People like Brian Thoreen. Well, he's in Mexico, so I'd have to consider that. But anyway, we'll see. No, he's American-ish.
Yeah.
No, anyway, there's a ton of people that we would choose.
I wonder how it works if there would be for some folks a conflict of, I don't know what you call conflict of interest, where, for example, I remember I was talking to a furniture designer at Collectible who I can't remember which gallery she's with in New York. But she has exclusivity with them within the New York City region.
Yeah, that's a problem.
But she's largely independent, except with them in New York City.
Yeah, see, it's an uphill battle, so there's going to be people that are not able to do the fair because of that reason, because of this exclusivity thing, which, I don't think is beneficial to anyone unless they're really driving sales for them. And that's what a lot of galleries or showrooms do, right? They'll like, they'll want to sequester you,
Hmm.
be like, let's own this person in this marketplace. And it's like, that's,
People
if
tell
it,
me that all the time, actually. They're like, area should have exclusivity. And I'm like, I don't really believe in that.
exclusivity
Like,
on area, what does that mean? Like you can't be
for
on Adorno
example,
and
that,
First Dibs?
or that I have exclusivity to certain pieces. So I'm the one that sells your pieces online and no one else can sell them online. And I just don't, like, I don't believe in that. If
I'm glad you don't
that
believe in that, yeah.
you only have to do that if you're actually not really good at your job in the first place.
You mean if you haven't built the right kind of business model that supports
Yeah.
your business and not having to,
Then you have to worry that people are going to circumvent you. But I think
correct.
if you are building a good business, in a gallery's case, if you have a good, healthy base of collectors, why do I am aware that collectors are actually quite loyal to the galleries that they work with. And so I
Yeah.
don't think a collector doesn't want to go to a furniture designer themselves and try to negotiate that piece or handle those, like, the logistics of that. A gallery does help from the buyer side quite a bit. And so I think that if you have to, I believe maybe in like exclusivity to a specific piece, but not to a person.
Agreed. And
Yeah.
that's actually a smart move. So I think I introduced you to Soo Joo. Remember Soo Joo from Korea?
Hmm.
So she was kind of going through this where she had, I think she has exclusivity in New York for her mirrors.
Hmm.
But, there's also something, I don't love that model even.
Hmm.
I hear what you're saying. Yes, I prefer it. I think that, for example, I think Matthieu Lehanneur has a very good way. He's an independent, but he shows certain collections with carpenters, right? I think they have like the wavy
Hmm.
stuff, the waves, okay, the ocean stuff. But I think he like sells and produces his own other stuff outside of that. I think Vincenzo De Cotiis has the same thing. I think smart designers who have a business acumen say, like, if I were to get involved with the gallery, that's what I would say. Listen, I'm going to make a collection for you. And I did this.
Hmm.
I did it with Maison Girard, who I love. Maison Girard they're a fucking massive player in New York. Like
Hmm.
they may not seem like the way that Carpenters or Freeman Bendis, but those guys fucking sell shit. Okay. So
Hmm.
in 2017, we did a show called Escape. It was my first time presenting those like packed landscape pieces where they're like 3D landscapes. And they asked me for either 6 months to a year of exclusivity on them. Fine, I did the deal. After that, we're both able to sell. And
Hmm.
both of us have continued to sell those works
Hmm.
independently and together. And that deal worked out fabulous. So they still can
Hmm.
sell the escape pieces, and they still do. And I sell those pieces now too. And we both sell them for the same prices, and we have a nice agreement, and it fucking worked out really well. So
I actually
partner,
know someone who recently fell out of an agreement with a showroom because she had a buyer for her piece independently and the showroom wouldn't let her sell it
typical.
herself, even though it was very much her relationship and her buyer that she brought. So they terminated her agreement, her contract.
Typical. Typical. It's so typical. Typical. Yeah. What's that song actually? I love that song. It's not typical. It was like an 80s song, I think. Um anyway, yeah, that's what happens.
Mm.
This is why, there needs to dude, I'm a fucking revolutionist, I want to see the whole thing burned down and be rebuilt, like I want to see like, because I really want the next gen to succeed.
Okay, what about this fair in LA that you're now not doing?
Oh, good question. I thought I was
Design,
going to bring this up. Actually, I'm glad you did.
yeah. So design spaces for those who don't know, is a fair or event, design event coming to LA. I guess facilitated by Basic Space, who acquired Design Miami last year, 2 years ago. And so they are now having an event called Design Spaces.
Correct.
Okay. And you
All
were
right.
supposed to be a part
I
of
was
it.
in, I accepted. So for people who don't know what Basic Space is, basically a website that sells very expensive design all the way down to like a ball cap, which is one of their best-selling pieces on there. Anyway, so
I don't know where you heard that from.
I don't know where I heard that from. I don't know. I heard just so anyway. So Basic Space, yes, they acquired through there because they have private equity money. They acquired Design Miami. So, by the way, which is a very interesting thing, right? Because once private equity buys something, they want to see you make money. And so why Design Miami is expanding their horizons to potentially Aspen, to Paris, is because that they need to drive revenue now. When Design Miami started 15, 16 years ago, dude, it had a great premise, it was started by the people in Miami, Ambra Maida and the rich guy, anyway, her husband at the time, who everyone knows, he built the design, David Robinson. Anyway, so they started something nice. And so now that it's become this conglomerate and now it's owned by private equity, they're forced to make money. So they're going to have to figure out a model. Additionally, now that Basic Space owns them, they're trying to kind of help, build this brand of sophisticated design and art and all this stuff. So what they did is they're like, okay, we're going to take over the Pacific Design Center, which is, if you've ever been to the Pacific Design Center, it's like a mall, kind of. And so they're going to have artists, designers, fashion houses. So I was going to be with Bottega Veneta. I was told that David Zwirner and Jeffrey Deitch were going to be showing there.
Wow.
I didn't see them on the final list. Anyway, we're buying a new building in April 15th. We're buying a new building. So my finances, like we're putting all of our money towards that. So I really couldn't like swing going there, doing the fair, blah, blah, blah. But this was the deal. No fee year one. They wanted to split it 50-50. I worked out a 60-40 deal. And I think that was interesting. I don't know how the logistics of that works. And what I assumed was that they were going to want me to put my products then on their website, which I was kind of uncomfortable with. So, but again, to the point is that there are people trying new models out there. How successful they will be, I don't know. And if you think about it, right?
That I won't be here. I will be in New York during that.
I wish I had some eyes on it.
Yeah, I did. One of the girls, an amazing artist, designer, home showing at Lyle, Lily Clark. She's based here in LA. I went to visit her studio about a week ago, and she told me that she actually has a piece at Design Spaces too. So I'm gonna follow up with her and get her take.
I mean, let's run through it a little bit, right? Everyone's gonna come. It's gonna be kind of a mall. So it's not gonna be like distinguished booths, but rather curated kind of space. First of all, the Palisades are decimated. So a massive cohort of the wealthy people that would be buying design are probably not going to be focused on buying design at that moment.
Yeah, and then on the other hand, in Altadena was actually the home of a lot of the LA-based makers and designers.
Oh, the lost studios?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have that still kind of lingering in the background. And for the people there, it's still a fucking everyday reality. I mean, you're close to it. So you got that. Then we're going to celebrate design and art under those circumstances and try to sell, I'm going to take a $50,000 lamp there. Like, there's a little, to me, it felt a little tone deaf, but I understand, like, if you present an event, you got to do the fucking event, and I get it.
I mean, I went to Freeze last week in LA, and it seemed
buzzing.
Kind of business as normal.
Yeah.
They did have a space right when you walked in. There was a booth that was, a curation of artists affected by the fires.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
But that was kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, the art market's a different beast. You may see a lot of activity, but that doesn't mean that transactions are happening exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah, also, if you think about the LA culture, people love being seen at the right, cool places, right? So you want to go to Freeze, but that doesn't mean that you're buying, and celebrities don't really buy art. There are the few, the Leonardo DiCaprios, but there's not a ton of them. And
I wonder, does Design Spaces have an entry fee, or is it free entry? Do you know?
I'm sure they're going to have to charge because they got to make some revenue, but yeah.
I'm really curious. I was actually... I think the biggest, I've thought about doing a show in LA, like self-organized. It is so hard in LA to get people to show up somewhere. It is the biggest challenge, and Freeze obviously has a huge brand reputation already behind it. But I recently talked to someone who showed at like an interesting like vintage market, this big market called, actually, I don't want to talk about it. I'll tell you why later. Anyway,
okay.
I won't tell you the name, but there was this big vintage market that came here to LA, and like nobody showed up to it.
Yeah.
And there were, I don't know, maybe like 100 to 200 like sellers there, and like the attendance was so low, and the amount of PR and communications that you have to put in to make people in Los Angeles show up to something is insane. In New York, even with the Lyle show, like, yes, we can do a bit of PR and comms and social media, whatever, but people in New York show up. They love openings. They love going to see culture on the weekends.
Yeah.
And second of all, you get foot traffic.
Right.
And so you get a certain percentage of people that just like stumble upon you.
Right.
But in LA, nobody stumbles upon anything.
No, that show, you're going to have to drive there. You're going to have to park your car. You're going to have to like know that it's...
Yeah.
Look,
so I'm curious to hear about how it all goes. Yeah.
I would do it if we weren't moving into this new building. I would have done it. I would have been like, listen, I can afford to do this. It's fine. The shipping would have been like $10,000, which, well, 10,000 each. Maybe could have gotten 10 grand back and forth. I don't know. That's probably closer to 15. And then the hotel and all that, it probably cost me 20 G's to do it. Now 20 G's plus, then I got to give them 40% of the sales, right? The numbers don't stack up lovely for us, doing it. But kind of worth the exposure, maybe. By the way, my sales in LA are pale in comparison to my sales in New York. I mean, New York's my number one market, but still, you would think, dude, I sell to the top designers in LA, but nowhere near the fucking amount. So,
it's interesting.
Yeah. Like, am I going to go there and, okay, we're in the fucking mall thing at the Design Center. Like, there's no booth. So what am I going to do? Just stand around my work with,
Oh, interesting.
Like, how am I closing a sale?
It's interesting that they're also bringing in some of like luxury fashion brands.
Right.
I don't know if that's good or bad. Like, no one's done that before.
Right,
I haven't seen that.
What it's going to do is going to attract a bunch of those influencer people who all they want to do is be in their fucking like cool, Comme des Garçons fucking or whatever they're wearing. And, and then they're going to like sit on my fucking bench and take like cool photos of themselves. And that's what I brought my fucking work.
You're going to get canceled for this.
Dude, I'm just saying, like, what? No, because I've done these enough to know, like, I don't want to just be the background for some influencers fucking post. Like, I'm there to show my work and get new clients. Having an influencer pose with my side table doesn't close deals.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I get it. They're experimenting. Do your thing. I think you
Yeah, I
need to
actually
stay.
just wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was
I
just
wanted
saying,
to look
like,
something up.
stay focused. Okay.
Mm.
I don't try to branch too far outside of my domain. Okay. Like, I really don't. Like, I have done collaborations. Okay. I've done collaboration with, I did a massive collaboration with Audemars Piguet, but Audemars Piguet is one of the top watch brands on the planet. It's like Patek and them and Vacheron. It's like so I wanted to align myself with them. Right. But it fucking distracted from my studio for 2 years doing that collaboration, but it was worth it. But my point is that, like, stay focused. Like, dude, you want to take your work to Milan because Milan is a great design mecca? Okay, but you're not going to sell shit. Just know that. Italians don't buy. Just know what the hell you're getting yourself into. And I think, stay focused on it. And I think, and I say that to these design fairs too, like, stay focused. Okay. When you start throwing Bottega Veneta next to Fernando Laposse studio, the message gets confused a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's a bit obvious. It's a bit of an odd combination, Basic Space and Design Miami. And it's, I remember when I talked to the Basic Space guy, at the time, it wasn't their intention to join together in any way. Like, he sort of explained it to me that Design Miami is going to stay its own entity and Basic Space will largely too. So, and I kind of see that the values of the two organizations are a little bit different. So it's curious to see how they will end up coming together.
This is always what happens with private equity. Okay. They start merging based on these big ideas, and, we'll see what happens, Can a website that sells $20,000 vintage furniture or contemporary furniture sell? Like, can you? I don't know. Like, maybe.
I think not in the way that they're selling.
Right. So,
but I wanted to just look at the Matter in Shape exhibitors, that fair that's happening now
tomorrow, right?
Yeah, in Paris.
So what we should do is maybe we'll do a little review of them next episode.
Yeah, because I actually found their list of exhibitors to be very interesting. Like, they have Collectible first and foremost, which is a fair showing in a fair.
Okay.
They have Vitra.
Have the like big museum brand or museum, right?
Like, no, Vitra, like the guys who produce like Eames chairs.
Right, that's what I mean. Vitra. They're Vitra. Yeah, the big museum. Don't they have a big ass museum, Vitra Museum?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Switzerland, I think. Vitra. They have Forma Fantasma, actually. Okay. They have Gallery. Okay, they have Frama, the Johann's.
Frama, I have his chair. Yep.
Yeah.
But by the way, look over the list.
But they have like,
no
and then
Americans.
they have this.
There's no Americans. There's not a single American brand.
Yeah. Oh, they have
it's all Denmark.
From...
It's all like other areas of Europe.
Yeah. It's mostly European. I mean, which makes sense also from a logistics perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think it's an interesting combination of, right before we jumped on this call talking about, I mean, Forma Fantasma, it looks like it's a collaboration with someone else, but they're pulling really, in some ways, like the best of the best, I think, of a lot of different sectors categories, or like silos of design. So yeah, Vitra is the best in their category. Collectible, I would say, in Europe is probably the best with emerging designers. Forma Fantasma is the best in their sort of like speculative design category.
Whatever they do.
So it's kind of, I'm like, let's get it. Should we fly?
Yeah. You know what? What we'll do is we'll take a look at the fair and we'll talk about it. We'll like see what the posts look like, what the fair actually, because one of the things going back, like just circling back to the beginning of the conversation about unique Design X, dude, the way that it appears looks glamorous, looks cool, looks all this stuff. And then when you look deeper, into like Instagram and the
Hmm.
posts. And if you go to the tagged parts of the fair feels a little flat-footed, a little like
Oh, interesting.
cheesy, a little like not high-end. And
Hmm.
maybe that's a vibe, and I'm only judging it based on Instagram posts, but I've done enough fairs to know that, I don't know, it's not there for me yet,
I mean, there's fairs in a few different categories. Yeah, actually, their website has a totally different feeling than their Instagram. It's kind of interesting.
Unique X?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious to.
Well,
I
let's do a
mean,
follow-up.
Paris seems like an interesting hub. Like they have Maison
OJ.
Objet.
Yes.
Yeah, that
They've got
happened.
the
And
new
yeah.
fair, the new design Miami. Listen,
Mm.
I'm telling you as a seller, I don't fucking sell in Paris, dude. And again, like I'm not trying to be like, my work should sell everywhere. I'm not saying that. But I've been in it for 14 years, almost 15 years now. And to never have sold a piece to fucking Paris?
Hmm.
Well, I'm sure I have one or two, or maybe it was to a design company that ended up doing a thing there, like there was doing a project there. But I don't have a relationship with the Paris designers or collectors. There's no collectors, by the way, in Paris. Like not real, that's not where they spend their money. So I don't know. I fucking love Paris, my favorite city in the world. It's like Mexico City and Paris are my two other favorite cities outside of New York. And I would love to go like live there, make a living there, be a fucking famous Paris designer.
But from a business perspective,
From a business perspective, it's just
U.S., New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a few corrections I need to make. Not even real corrections, but just some caveats to what I said earlier. So my sales team actually made some corrections. They're like, Fern, we do sell in those areas. We do sell in Paris. We have sold internationally. In fact, the fairs have been so good to us over time that we do sell in these places. For example, we went to Dubai. We sold in Dubai. But I mean, we didn't sell at the fair. This is what I want to correct. We don't typically sell at the fairs, but 6 months to a year later, you do actually start to see sales from there. So I don't want to discourage people. Like, these things do work. I do sell in Paris. Actually, when I said that, we were actually selling 2 pieces in Paris at the time. And I was like, oops. But it's just that they're not the majority of my sales, okay? When I was talking about where our sales mostly are generated, it is mostly in the United States, mostly in New York City, because there is just a voracious, appetite for these types of works in this area. But we do sell internationally, of course. It's not like it's zilch. But so I just wanted to make that little correction. Fairs do work, but they take time. That's all. Okay, so it is an investment that you don't see your return on immediately. But like I have had a tremendous relationship with Dubai, where we sell all the time. And that came from one fair that I did back in 2019. And actually, one of my best-selling mirrors came from that show. So, so anyway, so sometimes as you'll get to know, I'm a little hyperbolic. I could be a little bit like, this is the way it is. But essentially, we do have good sales and relationships across the pond. And so anyway, so as you get to know me, we are a little hyperbolic, but overall, we have pretty steady sales. So I don't want you guys to think that if you do these things, you're never going to sell anything anywhere else besides the United States. So just a little correction there. Well, this has been an interesting
Cool.
episode.
Yeah, I think this was great.
We had it out a little bit about design fairs. I'm always going to talk about these things because I have a lot to say about them. But
yeah, and I hope once we, get this podcast out there and, see what the kind of response is and how people are listening, that we can eventually bring a few folks in who've been
Sure.
on, maybe different sides of
Totally.
the fair. And
I would love that.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it. We got to see how this goes. But for the early adopters who are listening to this, we're super thankful. We're doing it for you guys. We're not getting paid for this. We don't have any advertisers. Actually, our 2 sponsors Fernando Mastrangelo Studio and Area are the two sponsors. We want to thank our sponsors for this.
Let's thank our sponsors.
We got to thank our sponsors. And look, essentially, again,
But
yeah,
if you want to sponsor,
if you want to sponsor, yeah, definitely. We'll say some great things about you for sure. I mean, it's got to align with us. You can't be like some rinky
for
dink.
sure.
But no. The other thing is I wanted to say, I know people say this all the fucking time on these things, but if you do want us to continue doing this, just hit subscribe, hit the little follow button, or write us a review, or both, because that'd be awesome. And I'm not saying this because of I didn't make up the algorithm. The algorithm is the fucking algorithm. You need to hit those things for us to know if you like it, if you want us to say more. And one of the things I would like to propose here is that I would like to do studio visits, me and you, on live on the fucking pod, where we bring in, and the person who we are doing, they set up the camera, they show us around the shop, they tell us what they're working on, and we give them a nice review or crit, and we can have it, and it could be really something really fun to do. So it'd be really fun. So if you're out there and you do want that, send us a DM or an email, or or write in the review section that you would like a studio visit from Alyssa and Fernando. So
great.
All right, episode 2. Woohoo! All right. You can you know where to find us. Tell them quickly your Instagram or areas.
You can follow Area at area_XYZ. Area is spelled ERRIA_XYZ.
And you can find me at IAMFM on Instagram, and at mastrangelo.co as my website. Anyway, thanks guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
See you soon.
And we will see you soon.